So welcome to New Perspectives, an Integral Yoga platform that's sponsored by Aro University in Surat, India, and Sri Aurobindo Integral Life Center in Surat, as well as here in Fountain Inn, South Carolina. All three organizations are founded by H.P. Rama, who is with us here today. I'm Rade, Executive Director of the Center in Fountain Inn, and I am joined by my colleague, Dr. Vladimir Yatsenko. As New Perspectives continues its series on the evolution of consciousness, we are very pleased to host once again Dr. Soumitra Basu. Last month, Dr. Basu addressed the lower regions of consciousness, the subconscious and inconscient realms, and today he's going to speak on the higher regions of the overmental and supramental consciousness planes. Welcome back, Dr. Basu, and it's always such an honor to have you with us here on New Perspectives. Writing on the consequences for humanity of the descent of the supramental consciousness into our earthly existence, Sri Aurobindo says, one cannot but conclude that the influence and change made on humanity would be far-reaching and enormous. It would not only establish the supermind and supramental race of beings upon earth, it would bring about an uplifting and transformational change in mind itself, and as an inevitable consequence in the consciousness of man, the mental being, and would equally bring about a radical and transforming change in the principles and forms of his living, his ways of action, and the whole build and tenor of his life. Today, Dr. Vladimir Yatsenko will open the New Perspectives Forum on the overmental and supramental consciousness with an introduction before handing it over to Dr. Basu.
Yes, thank you, Radhe. Before, of course, we begin this immense topic on overmental and supramental consciousness, I must say that it is the major contribution of Sri Aurobindo and his vision. He recovered these planes in his own experience. First of all, he discovered the overmind. Overmind is the realm beyond the mind. And that's why it is called overmind realm. And for the long time in his studies and his research, he understood that overmind was the supermind and treated it as supermind. And then applying the forces of the overmental consciousness to the transformation of our being, of our mind, vital and physical, he noticed that the physical cannot be changed. The physical consciousness is not changing with application of this force. And then he traveled farther, higher, beyond the overmind, and he discovered the real, true supermind. And that is his major contribution to the development and understanding of our existence. So Sri Aurobindo believed that man is a transitional being and is to rise beyond the mind and finally become the supramental being. So the next stage in evolution will be overmental stage and then the supramental stage. What is interesting about the overmind is its relation to our mind and to the supermind beyond. And the relations are very unique. And I want to show you some picture here, which is made by Huda. Let me make a projection. So here you could see that the supermind is that which links the transcendental Satchitananda with our lower hemisphere, Sri Aurobindo calls it, with our mind, life, and matter. But the transition from supermind to our lower hemisphere, mind, prana, and annam, life and matter, is the overmental realm. It's hidden within. It's in the Vedas, the supermind was understood as the realm of the sun, Surya. And the overmental consciousness, Svar, is the realm of the ray of the sun, where the darkness meets the sun, the body of the sun, and pervades it. So it creates this separated consciousness. Though it is still true, the rays of the sun are true representatives of the sun itself, but still it is already viewed in its own unique way, separately from one another. And that separation is the basic difference between the supermind and the overmind. So if we look into a more detailed view on this scheme, we could see that this is the whole realm, so to say, in its triple representative of beyond we have Asat, and then we have Satchit Tapas Ananda, the transcendental trinity, being, consciousness, power, and bliss. Then we have the connection between the Satchit Tapas Ananda in this world, which we call supermind or Vijnana, which has also three levels, as Sri Aurobindo describes in Life Divine: unifying, diversifying, and diversified levels. So unifying is the level of where unity is maintained, diversifying the one in many and many in one, and finally the many which are charged with the truth. And that, when it overflows into the lower hemisphere, into the night of our inconscient being, creates that intermediary realm which he calls overmind. And overmind is also triple, according to Sri Aurobindo. There is overmental supermind, supramental overmind. This is my mistake. Supramental overmind. Supramental overmind, which is the closest to the supermind, the first deviation of the light into the darkness, as it were. Then there is the overmental realm, overmind itself. Oh, the realm where all the presentation of the light are in clusters. It's a huge cosmic consciousness. And then there is a more diversified level of the rays or intuition, where the intuition acts upon our lower hemisphere and brings those rays of light into a particular context. It's more diversified, representative of that truth of the overmind. And then we have our mind, which is also triple. There is illumined mind, the highest in our field of lower hemisphere, so to say. There is the higher mind, which is corresponding. If we look at the chakras, we would see like Sahasrara, Ajna, and Vishuddha. These are three levels of our proper mind. Rational mind. And then we have the vital realms, also triple. The emotions, feelings, sensations, mental vital, physical vital, and finally we have the physical, also triple. And notice this triplicity is interwoven in that triple Satchit Ananda, which is represented in triple supermind, which is again becomes the origin for the overmind triple, which is the basis for our mind, vital and physical, which is also triple. So this triplicity is found throughout. This is how the worlds are built. No? And of course, in the Rig Veda, we have a beautiful description of these levels. And that's what Sri Aurobindo recovered for us, the Vedic knowledge. So now we can read Rig Veda with kind of meaningful approach. that the triple supermind is Tridevatata, the spreading of the divine in triple realms. And then triple overmind is Tri Nirochana, three luminous realms of the ray of the sun, Svar world. And then there is Tisro Dyavach, three heavens or triple mind, again luminous minds. And then Trini Rajansi or Tri Rajansi, three flaming realms of the vital, and Tisro Bhumich, three earths of our mental, of our physical consciousness. And below we have subconscious and inconscious. So if you look at the Huta's picture, we could see these relations between levels of consciousness, which Mother explained in terms of colors, which is quite amazing. So we can see that all our lower hemisphere arriving at the illumined mind, it is our Sahasrara chakra, as it were. And beyond Sahasrara, we have three more realms, and that is intuition, first level, then overmind, and then the closest, which is not reflected here, is supramental overmind, closest to the supermind. And then we have the supermind golden color. Notice that the shift of color between illumined mind and intuition is drastic, from light blue to totally yellow. So this golden supermind through overmind and intuition acts upon our highest mind in the embodied state and brings the light in from another realm. So overmind is built actually on the truth of the supermind, though it meets the darkness of our involved state. The illumined mind is the top, and it is built on the inconscient, and you can see this blue, the dark colors. It is still belonging to this evolving mind, and there they meet, the overmental and our lower mind consciousness. So Sri Aurobindo describes this in a very interesting way. Overmind takes up all that is in three steps below it and raises their characteristic workings to the highest and largest power, adding to them a universal wideness of consciousness and force, a harmonious concert of knowledge, a more manifold delight of being. But there are certain reasons arising from its own characteristic status and power that prevent it from being the final possibility of the spiritual evolution. It is a power through the highest, though the highest power of the lower hemisphere. It is the highest power of the lower hemisphere because it's already in the darkness of the inconscient. It already met the separated power of the night. Although its basis is the cosmic unity, its action is an action of division and interaction, an action taking its stand on the play of the multiplicity. And here I will stop with my short introduction and will give microphone to Soumitra. Soumitra, please.
Thank you. Thank you. So it was a very beautiful presentation, and Huta's paintings were also very touching. And the supermind and the overmind are very great topics. I would say the ultimate topics that is possible in the realm of thinking, and we have to approach it from many angles. We'll just try to understand one small aspect of it today, because it is something which will require a long time. As Vladimir said, that the supramental manifestation, when it takes place, then the new race will be formed. The supramental creation will bring in its new species, and for that would be the actually that is the greatest contribution which Sri Aurobindo has given to us. And not only it is something which is there in conception, but Sri Aurobindo's contribution is that he has made it possible for that manifestation to actually take place. So he has taken steps for that, so that we don't miss it. So that is another story. So that requires also understanding from different angles, from very different perspectives. We have to approach the supermind, because it is the highest conception ever can be done about humanity, and so it requires to be built up from many many sides. So we will try to understand it from a one small perspective today, and then if it is, if we see that it is interesting, then we can go on afterwards in different sessions. We can take up different aspects of it. Now, when Sri Aurobindo was thinking about it, that was one very basic question he was trying to answer. And that basic question was always there for many, many years in the Indian, scenario, that how could one become many? You see that we have always been told that there was the Supreme who was the one, it was a supreme unity, it was a oneness, and that then oneness become many. Now it is very difficult for us to understand, if, and then especially if we try to understand it from the scientific angle, then it becomes difficult, because then we try to trace it in time. But this is something which you cannot trace in time, because the manifestation is taking is having its origin at something which is timeless, something which is timeless, something which is beyond space and time. So it is very difficult to understand if you want to draw a linear time, and we think that there was one big gong was sounded and again the manifestation started. So it's not like that. It's much more difficult and complicated. And Sri Aurobindo was trying to understand this and give a metaphysical answer. Now it is very interesting that in Swami Vivekananda had once commented that this question has not been answered for several thousands of years, and it is Swami Vivekananda's comment that they have used the term Maya, that illusion, to explain how one became the many. It's by an illusion one became the many. But then, like a magician does an illusion, a trick, which is actually an illusion, and we think that something really has happened, like a lady is being cut into two halves, but it's an illusion. So it's something like that as an illusion that actually made the trick. But then Swami Vivekananda himself confessed that the Maya that was being used to describe that phenomenon was a descriptive term, not an explanatory term. It was a descriptive term, not an explanatory term. And he had once commented in his collected works, he said that anybody who will be explaining it will be doing a great service to the world of thought. And it is very, we are very fortunate that Sri Aurobindo gave an explanation. And for that explanation, to understand how Sri Aurobindo gave that explanation, then we have to understand that what is the concept of supermind that he brought in, because that was the way in through the supermind he gave that explanation, that how could one become many. That means that the supermind is just like what you call, is running a computer program where the unmanifest will be programmed to become the many. So he's running a software, a giant software program, a divine software program. The supermind is running. Is that consciousness? Is the creative consciousness which is actually running a big software program where what is unmanifest, what is absolute, what is unite, what is unity, supreme unity, that will be actually translated into terms of multiplicity. So we'll go back to the, we'll go to the slides, so it will be easier for you to follow. Post visible, what is most? Why it is coming like this? So this is this dilemma that Sri Aurobindo looks for the origin of the creative idea. Now, where is the creative idea situated? Then this is, he surmised that it cannot be the absolute, because in the absolute there is no manifestation. The absolute is something which is unmanifest. And even when we conceive the absolute in terms of Satchidananda, there is no movement in Satchidananda. You see that because we only understand things by breaking up things, so we analyze Satchidananda as into three components: existence, consciousness force, and bliss. But then Sri Aurobindo says it is a triune unity. It is a triune unity. It is the same thing in three poises. It is not three different things. It is not existence plus consciousness plus ananda. It is the same thing, which in different poises it appears different. But there is an absolute unity there between existence, between consciousness, between bliss, and there is no movement. So unless there is any movement, there cannot be any manifestation. So you cannot have the absolute as an answer that it is the origin of the creative idea. And then, is it there in the universal mind? But that is also difficult. You see, the universal mind, if you consider it as a magnification of our individual mind, our individual mindsets, then you can see that how difficult it is. Because in our individual mind, when we throw it into the universe, we magnify it. We see that in our individual mind, we have great positive mental formations, and we have also negative ideas. So that in the universal consciousness, there are great positive waves and there are great negative waves. As we have an personal unconscious, so also in the universal consciousness, in the universal mind, there is an universal unconsciousness. There is an universal, what you call, inconscience. There is a cosmic ignorance. There is also cosmic suffering. So you can't say that the universal mind is the source of the creative idea. So this source must be something different. Now, then, to understand it, we have to think that what do we do if we want to create something? Suppose I want to draw a picture. It's an easy thing to understand. I want to draw a picture. Then you see that if we try to think how we create and then we throw it there above into the, what you call, in the vastness, and we see that how that thing gets replicated or magnified there, then a little inkling we'll have that how things go on. You see, if you want to draw a picture, if you want to draw a very nice picture, the first is that you have to have a creative idea. You have to have an idea that what are you going to draw. You are wanting to paint a picture, and then you have to have an idea that you want to draw something. You want to draw a picture of a very beautiful forest. You want to do it. But then just having an idea doesn't mean that you will be able to draw the picture. In the morning, you get up in the morning and you think that I will take up my what you call my brush, and I will paint. But then it might be that you might not have the energy. You see, you might not have the energy that day to execute your idea. So a creative idea is not enough. That idea has to be accompanied by an energy. If you do not have that energy, then you will not be able to express that idea. You will not be able to execute that idea. You will not be able to manifest that idea. And then that also is not enough. You see, you want to draw something, and that drawing also has to follow a pattern. You cannot sketch something which gives an impression of something which you don't want to express, or you can't have something which is going to be absurd. You want to do something which will have a meaning, and to have that meaning, you have that your idea and the force, they must be in alignment together with the rest of the things in the universe. So you have to have a law, so that you follow a particular grammar. So if you don't have the grammar, you can't execute your idea. You can have an idea, you have the energy, but you have to have grammar. So if you are doing an oil painting, you have to have a grammar for that oil painting, how to do it and how to express it through that oil painting. If you want to draw in pastel, then you have to also have a law of how to use that pastel. Or if you want to, instead of that picture, you want to build a statue, then of course you have to have a law so that the statue you make will be there on the road standing and withstanding the forces of wind and rain and all that. No? A statue has to stand there, and it should not fall down when a storm comes or when the rain comes. So you have to have a law which put all things in the proper places. And then that is also not enough. As an artist, you have to have a canvas. Where are you going to draw? You are going to draw it. You are not going to draw it in a vacuum. So you want to manifest a picture, you want to reproduce a picture, so you want to have a field where this picture will actually take place. And these things, all of us, when we try to be something creative and we want to establish that creativity in the world, then all these things we have to undergo. We have to have an idea, we have to have a force that will effectuate the idea, we have to have a grammar or a law that will put things in place, and we have to have a field where our idea will be executed. Now you just throw the whole phenomenon that I'm saying into the universe of the cosmos, to the creative mind that has created the whole worlds, the mind that has created the multiverses. You just throw all these things that I've told you, you just throw it there and see, you need a very great creative idea, a mighty idea, giant idea, the idea that has produced the universes, the idea that has produced the multiverses, the Milky Way, all the planets. It's a big idea, mighty idea. It's not an ordinary idea. And what was very interesting is that idea was impregnated with energy, with force. So that idea itself was having an automatic energy or force inside it, and it got carried out. So everywhere, everything was put into place. All the planets, all the things, all the multiverses, all our planes of consciousness, they were all put into their proper place because that idea was having an energy to manifest that idea. You see, that giant idea that is creating the great worlds. For us, we can't conceive of it because in us, the consciousness and force, they have become separated. You see, that is our dilemma, and we can't understand the manifestation because in our ordinary life, the consciousness and force are separate. They are not aligned with each other. Even Sri Aurobindo did this work of aligning the consciousness and force in his own being, and because he could do that with his Chit Shakti, he could reach that place where he could identify with that giant creative idea, which automatically with his force, it was executing what it wanted to execute. And then there was a law. You see, that was a law that was very necessary. That law, you see, that why it was necessary at that giant, plane, why that law was very necessary? Because when the unmanifest is going to manifest, when the infinite is going to manifest into, then there is an infinite number of possibilities that will be released. You see, when the one is going to manifest into the many, so infinite number of potentialities, infinite possibilities, they will manifest. And if there is a play of infinite possibilities, play of infinite forces and ideas, then there can be chaos. If there is chaos, there cannot be any consistent creation. So to prevent any chaos, there must be a law so that things are not chaotic. And because that law is there, so things were not chaotic, and then idea force generated things with which we could work out many things. You see, for example, if the law was not there, then we would not have the law of physics. We would not have the possibility of sending a spaceship to the Mars. You see, it would not have been possible unless there was a law that was putting everything in its place. Otherwise, we will be lost in the chaos. So in that total picture where infinite possibilities have been thrown up, there must be a law that must be acting and putting things in place so that some viable, something comes out. You see, otherwise we will be like creation can be like a group of clouds that have come together and coalesced, and suddenly there is a rain, which you can call a creation, and after that the clouds dissipate and then everything vanishes. It's not like that. We know that the creation has a meaning. It is otherwise today we have not met with each other. So that creation has a value, and for that value, for that meaning, the law has to put everything in its proper place, and that is the law which is called the divine law, and that is the law which also is known as the higher Maya or the divine Maya, whose essence had been lost, which Vladimir was saying that people were concerned with the lower Maya, which was the illusion, Maya which was considered to be the illusion. But the higher Maya is a different thing. It is a law of knowledge. It is a divine law that is putting things in the proper places. And then we have a field or a matrix where the manifestation has to take place. And this manifest field will be provided by space and time. We'll come to that, how space and time come into being. But the successions in time, because movement, time is movement, and in space, you have to have divisibility. Otherwise, you can't have different spaces. So by successions in time and divisibility in space, there is a created a field or a matrix in which the creation will manifest, will take place. So it's the same thing as if you are wanting to paint a picture on a canvas. It is the same thing that you throw it in a giant scale, and you see, you can have an inkling of how the great creation was going on. Now, this idea, we are talking about the idea. You see that we will talk about the idea, and we'll talk about the divine law, and we'll talk about the matrix. These are the three things we'll talk about today. Not much. So this idea that creates the multiverses, it is not an ordinary idea. Now we are used to very ordinary ideas, because as Vladimir showed you, that we are in that lower portion, in the rational mind. Mostly we are in the rational mind, we claim, but actually we are mostly in the infrarational mind. So that idea must be a totipotent idea, an idea that has a potency, and a very holistic potency, a total potency, omniscient and omnipotent. So this must be the characteristic of that idea. And that idea must have what we said, an inbuilt executive force, because you have to translate that idea into reality. So Sri Aurobindo called it a real idea. Sri Aurobindo called that type of idea which is going to create the manifestation, Sri Aurobindo called it the real idea. And you see that an artist reproduces a pre-existent idea. So an artist is reproducing what is from vacuum. He is bringing the idea. The idea is already pre-existing in some higher consciousness from where the artist is bringing it down. As Vladimir showed, that it is coming down through intuition from very high levels. He showed that the Supermind, Overmind, and then below that was the intuition. And so it was the intuition that is bringing in something that was already there. Similarly, the real idea, what it is doing, it is bringing the unmanifest. You see, in the unmanifest, there were things that were concentrated in uncreative self-awareness, and it is trying to bring it there, and it is programming it. The supermind is programming that what is there in the unmanifest, the potentialities which are there in the unmanifest. It is programming it so that the program will organize it into spiritual archetypes. You see, I use the word spiritual. Nolinida used to use the word spiritual, so to differentiate from Jungian archetypes. So Nolinida used to use the word spiritual. So this archetypal, what you call the archetypal pre-programmed thoughts. No? So that is being what you call manufactured there. That is being manufactured there in the supermind, and then so that is the programming is therefore taking place in a creative consciousness, which is poised between the unmanifest and the manifest. The supermind is poised between the unmanifest and the manifest. It is containing the self-determining truth of creation. So that immediately brings that it is the creator. That is the supermind God. What we use the word God. Is it that? Is the supermind the actual God? When we come to this divine law, we'll come to that supermind, whether the supermind can be considered as a god. But then we talk about a little about the higher Maya. Out of infinite possibilities, so consistent patterns have to be made. If consistent patterns were not there, we would end up in chaos. And so the divine law commissions a selective faculty of knowledge. So a selective faculty of knowledge is commissioned. No? So you have to have an out of infinite reality, you have to have selective faculties for different things. Laws that will guide biology, laws that will guide physics, physical things, laws that will guide the things with which chemistry is concerned, laws that will deal with the planets and all other things. Everything has a law and everything has a selective faculty. Otherwise, that thing will not be manifested, or that thing will not be worked out. So what was static has to become dynamic. What was static there in the unmanifest, the supermind is trying to bring it and making it dynamic. So from the supreme being, if we see Sachidananda, we also consider it as a being. Sachidananda can also be considered not only in terms of consciousness, but also in terms of a being. So out of the supreme being, a phenomenal being is being created. Now there is a very beautiful beauty in this thing, that the infinity cannot be perfectly expressed in finite. You see, the divine law is wanting to make finite appearances out of infinity, but it cannot be very perfectly done, because it is unjustified that the finite will express the infinite totally. Always there will be a gap left. There will be always an element of imperfection, and because of that, because of that element of imperfection, we always have an yearning to outgrow, to grow. You see, otherwise we would not have an yearning to outgrow ourselves. So we always want to outgrow our limitations. You see, it is not theoretical, it is a very practical thing. I use it in psychotherapy. This principle, I use it in psychotherapy when people come because they're shocked, their fiancés have betrayed them and left them, and people have betrayed them, and people get depressed. Then I always tell them that how did you think that a human being would be totally perfect? A human being cannot be totally perfect. That is basic yoga psychology. There will always be an element of imperfection, because of that imperfection, you will want to always to exceed yourself, to grow. If you are perfect, you will not want to develop yourself. You will remain static. So that's why the corollary is that perfection is always there only in the supreme divine, not in our human being, which, as Vladimir said in the beginning, is a transitional being. Now, there are many poises of the supermind. So there are actually he was talking about the trinity. So there is a primary, secondary, and there is a tertiary poise. I'm not going into the tertiary poise so that things become very difficult to understand in the beginning. So you see, the primary poise is that poise of supermind, where the multiplicity is just present as it is just present as a potentiality. So it is in the primary poise, it is unity, it is a oneness, but the oneness is containing the potentiality of the many. So it is something which is containing the potentiality of the many, but it is totally one. So you have to identify, oneness identifies with oneness, but at the same time, oneness knows that it is containing in its bosom, in its matrix, all the multiplicity. It contains as a potentiality, as a possibility that can come forward. So you see that when we say that if the creator is the supermind, if it is creating things, that can we consider the supermind to be the God? Which when people talk of a God, what do they refer to? They must be referring to the creator, and the creator means the creative consciousness. So you can say that the supermind also can be considered as a God. Actually, as Shobindra explains, that this concept of impersonal God came from this level of the supermind, the primary poise of the supermind, also known as the comprehending poise, where the multiplicity was present as the multiplicity was present as a potentiality, as an essence. It was present there. So it is therefore that is something that is going to be created. At the same time, nothing is particular. Everything is present as a possibility and potentiality. So this fits with the figure of the impersonal creator. And then there is the secondary poise. In the secondary poise, that multiplicity, which was there as a potentiality, is now comes to move forward a bit. It now comes to assert itself a bit. So though that it is there, it is held in that matrix of oneness, but still it is trying also to be something. It is also trying to be something. So it is something, if you see, in this poise, the creative consciousness is akin to the personal God. In this poise, the creative consciousness is akin to personal God, because when the multiplicity knows that it has been come from the oneness. That means each aspect of the multiplicity has the totality of the oneness as an essence inside it. Each aspect of the multiplicity has the totality of the oneness, as a potentiality inside it. That means, you see, this is the personal God. When we think that all of us are different human beings, but all of us can be linked with the same Godhead, and the Godhead is same in all of us. So the God is equally present in all of us, though we are all separate, but God is present equally in all of us. So this concept has only come from the secondary poise of the supermind, where the multiplicity was there, but the multiplicity knew that it was holding the oneness inside it. So it was not separate from the oneness. Only each aspect of the multiplicity will develop, but at the same time, it will have the totality of the oneness in each aspect of the multiplicity. So the concept of personal God has come from this aspect of the supermind. So you see that here knowledge of multiplicity from the poise of oneness. So it is the primary poise is the knowledge of oneness from the poise of oneness, and the secondary poise of supermind is the knowledge of multiplicity from the poise of oneness. When we come lower down, when we come to our mind, then science is the study of multiplicity from the poise of multiplicity. So science is different. It is studying multiplicity from the poise of multiplicity. So the whole game plan has changed by the time when you have reached that poise, where the multiplicity actually has lost all connection with the unity, so that it had come out from the unity. It was containing the unity, it was representing the unity that has been totally lost. So that is there at the lower level, at the level of our manifestation. So that is what science studies multiplicity from the poise of multiplicity. Now, the matrix of space and time. The matrix of space and time is a very interesting thing. The matrix of space and time is a very interesting thing. Now, you see, if you go back to this poise, the secondary poise, in the secondary poise, whenever multiplicity is trying to assert itself from the poise of oneness, that is a wave of inequality in the oneness. That is a wave of inequality in the oneness. Just this. So that is a wave of inequality in the oneness. So that inequality in the oneness, that is a wave of inequality in the oneness, and from that inequality of the oneness, many things are going to happen. So that basic unity is disturbed and wave of inequality comes. And this is very interesting. Otherwise, if we don't understand it, we will not understand how the manifestation is coming. So the comprehending poise is of a subjective self-awareness in spaceless and timeless reality. You see, the primary poise is a poise in spaceless and timeless reality. So space and time are present as an essence only. That is, you see, it is not there present in its what you call unique dimensions. Now, in the secondary poise, what happens? The principle of there is a movement of inequality, and when there is a movement of inequality, this movement of inequality is manifest both in the perspective of consciousness and both in the perspective of Shakti or force. So when the inequality is there, is cropping up in consciousness, in absolute consciousness, when there is an inequality, movement of inequality, an unequal concentration of consciousness begins, then you give rise to space. So space begins when in the matrix of the unitary consciousness, there is a movement towards multiplicity, and that movement, that multiplicity means there will be inequality. You see, when there are multiple things will come out, it is necessary that there will be a variety, and that variety doesn't mean that everything will be equal. So everything, you see, that for infinite variety, you see, you might say that everything can be equal in the multiplicity, but then that will be, the manifestation will not be then variegated. It will not be rich. For the manifestation to be rich, to be variegated, to be what you call very complex, then what has to happen? That all the things that will manifest, they will not be equal. They will be all different. And because things are different, each of one of us is unique. If things were not different, if the manifestation was producing equal things, then all of us would not have any uniqueness. We would be the same thing. Everybody would be the same, like robots or like automations. We would be equal. But we are not robots. We have consciousness. We are vibrant, and because we are vibrant, we are unique. And we are unique because all of us are not equal with each other. And that inequality started in the secondary poise of the supermind, when something was moving out for the manifestation to take place. And the first inequality was there in the realm of consciousness, and that gave rise to space. And the second inequality was there in the realm of force, in the dimension of force. So there was a multiple distribution of force. Force was not equally distributed. Force was distributed in an uneven way. So, and that gave rise to time. So you see that Sri Aurobindo gives a very beautiful description that how space and time is produced from the supermind. So that were the first things that were produced. You see, unless the matrix is produced, because space and time will be the matrix in which the manifestation has to take place. So before the actual manifestation, you have to produce the matrix or the field. You see, you have to have the canvas ready before you want to draw a picture. If the canvas is not ready, you will not be able to draw the picture in a vacuum. So you have to have the picture ready. So space is an objective extension of consciousness, and time is a subjective extension. So space is an objective extension of consciousness, and time is a subjective extension. And space is measured by divisibility, time by mobility. You see, and both space and time are required for the manifestation to take place. Only space, if there was only space, time was not produced, then multiplicity would be a static multiplicity. There would be no dynamism. There would be no progress. So you need both space. You need both space and time. So both are needed. You see, only time, you will not have only mobility, but you don't have forms. You see, there will be no forms with which the movement can or the manifestation can take place. And if there is only space and there is no time, there will be something which is static. There will be nothing dynamic. So you need both space and time. And to clear a conception, this is the clarification that I want to do. You see, within space and time are used in science, but there is a different way when Einstein uses it, and there is a difference in Sri Aurobindo's using the term. When Sri Aurobindo was asked that Einstein has introduced a fourth dimension in time, in addition to length, breadth, and height, and that combination he calls the time-space continuum. It can be considered as a cylinder over which a spiral is wound. But Sri Aurobindo says, you see, there is a difference. There is a difference in the way Einstein considered space and time and the way Sri Aurobindo considers it. Sri Aurobindo says that time cannot be relegated to the position of a mere dimension of space. It is independent in nature. That means he is not favoring the clamping together of space and time. It's not so easy. As he said, that time and space is very important. They are the fundamental dual dimensions of the Brahman. The fundamental dual dimensions of the Brahman. They are equally important. You see, you cannot clump them together and say space, time, everything is happening within space hyphen time. It's not like that. It's not so easy. They are dual dimensions, and they are the fundamental dual dimensions of the Brahman. Why fundamental? Because they are producing the matrix. And unless that matrix was there, the manifestation would not have taken place. And because of that, you see, there is a very interesting thing, because the inequality happened, the unequal distribution of space and this unequal distribution of the force. What happened? The possibility of error came. The possibility of error came, but also the possibility of progression also came. So you see, the same thing which gave rise to error, because whenever you have something unequal, you will not have perfection. There will always be error. But error means that you can go towards perfection, so that you can always progress. So error and progression, from the very beginning, they were given together, because error will always be there when you have some inequality, and because error is there, you will be striving to go towards equality. So that means error will stimulate you to progress. So this is a very interesting thing. Now the supermind descends to the overmind. You see, the supermind descends to the overmind, where these spiritual archetypes, you see that programming that was done. I said that the supermind was running a software program. The supermind was running a software program where the unmanifest will be manifested as potentialities, and these potentialities actually they start acting at the level of the overmind, where the multiplicity or the many, they begin to dominate. You see, the many, they begin to dominate. You see that it required at a certain time, the many have to dominate. Otherwise, the multiplicity, if it is not coming to the picture, then the manifestation will not take place. You see, we will be happy in the blissful state of oneness. So the many has to dominate at one point in time. But in the overmind, you see, remember that in the overmind is a big region, and as Vladimir showed, that is a part of the overmind which is close to the supermind, where the unity is very strong. You see that the many begins to dominate, but they're aware that they have come from the unity, they are based on the unity, they have been created out of the unity. So they're aware of that. But still, they begin to assert themselves. And that is the beginning of the knowledge of multiplicity. You know, in our Indian tradition, avidya, ignorance doesn't mean the way we use the word ignorance in common parlance, which means lack of knowledge. It's not that. It's of course knowledge. It's knowledge of multiplicity. It is not knowledge of unity, but it is knowledge of multiplicity. It is very important. If the knowledge of multiplicity was not there, then you would not have developed several disciplines. All these great disciplines that we have developed, that they would not have come if that knowledge of the multiplicity was not there. So you see the supermind is between the unmanifest and the manifest, while the overmind is between the knowledge of unity, which is vidya, and the knowledge of what you call the knowledge of multiplicity, which is avidya. So if the supermind is between the unmanifest and manifest, the overmind is between the knowledge of unity and the knowledge of multiplicity. When you come down from the overmind, as you go down and down and down, you lose the knowledge of unity altogether. So the overmind is like a golden lead or a creative oversoul. It is there. So these are all difficult terms. So you have to have separate sessions to understand why it is called the golden lead or the creative oversoul. Now the creation of inconscience. The creation of inconscience is a very interesting thing. The overmind is thus a screen between the supermind and the manifestation. It is acting as a screen between the supermind and the manifestation. It is a dynamic entity, a protective double. You see that performs, it is necessary, that screen is necessary. And Shaubindo called it a protective double, protection. It is giving a protection or a screen of dissimilar similarity. That is similarity and that is dissimilarity both together. And it performs, it has two functions. It does not allow a direct action of the supermind or the ignorance, because the ignorance will not be able to bear the total influx of the supermind. It is not possible. The ignorance cannot bear the total effect of the supermind, and that is why that shield is required. That is why a screen is required. But then it is doing another very interesting thing. Though it is not allowing the full flow of the supramental light, but it is diffusing a diminished light in the cosmic ignorance. You see, there is a cosmic ignorance below, and the overmind is not allowing the full supramental light to come, but diffusing some amount of light. It is diffusing, and this light that is diffusing some amount of light, not the full light, it is diffusing a diminished light in the cosmic ignorance, and this light is throwing up a shadow. Why it is throwing up a shadow? When it has gone to the rock bottom of ignorance, you see, the light is penetrating until it goes to a rock bottom where the resistance is so much that it cannot go further, and then it bounces back as a shadow, as a contrary shadow, and this shadow is then devouring or eating up all the light that is coming. You see, it is a paradox. You see, the light was that the overmind did not allow the full supramental light to come into the cosmic ignorance. It allowed only a diffusion of a small amount of light. That small amount of light reached the rock bottom of ignorance, and then it couldn't go further because there was so much resistance in the ignorance. The light could not go further, and when it could not go any further, it bounced back as a shadow, and that shadow, then other light that was coming following it devoured all that light, and that is how the inconscience was created. Such a beautiful description of the creation of inconscience. You see, Freud has described the unconscious, Jung has described the unconscious, but Shaubindo has described how the inconscience has been created, and therefore it can be said that overmind becomes the first parent of ignorance. Time is running up, so this is the last slide. So the supermind is permitting what you call the differentiation of the undifferentiated. You see, the supermind is permitting a differentiation of the undifferentiated, and each differentiated aspect is holding the essence of supermind. So each differentiated aspect, it is holding the essence of supermind. Otherwise, the electrons would have stopped rotating. You see, you can imagine what can happen if the electrons today decide to stop rotating. Our whole material universe will collapse. So something is there. Some inkling is there. Some shadow is there. Some aspect is there. Minute, dormant, hidden, but something is still there. Now, what Sri Aurobindo has postulated, that if the mind principle has been created by supermind, then it must be capable of resolving back to the supermind through a reverse development of expansion. So if mind principle has been created by supermind, then the mind can also go back to the supermind by a reverse process, a process of expansion of consciousness. And that expansion of consciousness is actually an evolution of the consciousness which has been carried over by our great avatars, by the great seers, when the biological evolution is one thing. But together with the biological evolution, there is a spiritual evolution that is also taking place. Remember, biological evolution, I'm not belittling it, I'm not ignoring it, that is one thing. But together with the biological evolution, in fact, more primary than the biological evolution is an evolution of spirituality, the evolution of consciousness that is going on. And the avatars that have come are actually leading that march. And you see, as Sri Aurobindo said, that if you lead that march of the consciousness in evolution, then you can go to different steps, and until you can go to the supermind. But actually, this step was being followed. Even Sri Rama and Sri Krishna were following that evolutionary path. But Buddha and Shankara, for certain purpose, they left that evolutionary spiral to go to the unmanifest, as the multiplicity was impermanent. As Vladimir was saying, that the great yogis, they left that path. I think he was telling this to me before the program started, that the great yogis left that path. Because, why they left? Because they saw that the multiplicity was impermanent. And the absolute light which was there in the unmanifest, that was more appealing, that was very appealing, very exciting. And so that the multiplicity had become so impermanent, so secondary, so tertiary to them, that they decided to leave that and to go to the unmanifest directly. So they left the curve of evolution. Buddha and Shankara left the curve of evolution, the natural curve of evolution, and they opted for a different goal. You see, that must be a meaning for that. We are not trying to it is not a critical appraisal of them. It's just a phenomenon that we are telling. Of course, that they had brought in great spiritual riches, but by that thing that they had, you see that Buddha, what he did was so important that even after 2,500 years, we still remember him. He is such a big, such a famous personality, and such was his work that it is still relevant. But still, you have to understand that Mother and Sri Aurobindo had to come back to resume the journey which was left by people like Buddha and Shankara. So they had to come back as dual avatars. Might be if this work was done before, then Mother and Sri Aurobindo would have done some other work. But they had to come back and they had to resume the journey as dual avatars, as Ishwar and the Shakti, which will come back as consciousness and force in our lives. So that is something that they had to do, and they had to resume that journey because it was left undone before. And another important thing is that always in our Indian system we have this description of the dissolution, pralaya. You see, in Indian parampara, evolution was not that important. You see, evolution was there in the parable of the avatars. The evolution was there as a seed idea, but the pralaya, or the dissolution of creation, was given more importance. And Mother and Sri Aurobindo, they were wanting that this creation should continue. It should not dissolve. There should not be a pralaya of this creation. There should not be a dissolution of that creation. So what Vishnu stands for, the continuity of creation. So that's why in Life Divine he has used the word Vishnu's stride, where Vishnu's stride means he is wanting to continue the work of Vishnu, of the creation has to be continued. And to continue that creation, the supermind has to be activated. Unless the supermind is activated, unless we reach the supermind, and unless we allow the supermind to manifest on the earth consciousness, you cannot have a guarantee that this creation will continue. Otherwise, the pralaya or the dissolution would come. So it is such a beautiful vision that Sri Aurobindo has given us. I think that my time is up, but it is very injustice. We cannot always speak on the supermind in a however long we can have the time. Always there will be always it is a beginning, always it is just an ABCD of what we are wanting to describe or manifest. I think I will end with this and give the mic to Vladimir.
Yeah, Thank you. Thank you, Soumitra. Wonderful presentation in every way, and very thought-provoking. And for the people who study Sri Aurobindo, it's a very great, very good overview. I hope that other people also have some questions or some insights, remarks. Please let us look into their questions and answers. Let us stop the sharing first. Great. We have some questions here. Yes, first you mentioned the difference between different archetypes, and the question is to you, Soumitra. What is the difference between spiritual archetypes and Jungian archetypes?
Oh, this is spiritual archetype. My spiritual archetype. Jungian archetype is just describing things which are there in the collective unconscious or the cosmic conscious. The collective unconscious is a very small part of the cosmic consciousness. It's one just small part. The cosmic consciousness is a very big area, and one aspect of it is Jung described as the collective unconscious. So you see that we have all our symbols, our mythologies, our dreams, they have a commonality. So that commonality means there is a common idea that is present in different, which is represented in different cultures by different icons. So that is Jung is concerned with that. But Sherman is concerned with the creative idea. It's not that idea which is existing there, and in different cultures it will be presented in different ways, in different dreams it will come, like the concept of the mother principle comes in different cultures in different ways. But Shamindo here is concerned with the creative archetypes. For example, all religions are different at the level of the mind. At the level of the overmind, they are all what you call outpourings of an universal religion. But at the supermind, the whole idea of religion is just present as an essence. Like in a canvas, you have a small a brush, a stroke with a brush, like that. It is just present as an essence. That essence, that is a spiritual archetype. And when it will come to the overmind, it will become the universal. It will be an universal religion which can support many religions. And at the level of the mind, they will become all contradictory things. So it's like that. The essence of everything is preserved there in the supermind, and that essence, the creative essence of everything, and that is called the spiritual archetype. Whereas these things are a cultural thing, which is there in the, which has come, of course, it is a derivative of the spiritual archetype. It's not that it is unrelated. It is something which has been derived and is present in the cosmic consciousness.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. There is another question here, which is more about Vedanta, Atman, and Brahman. Is the self-knowledge of Atman, Brahman identity of Vedanta at the stage of the supermind? Where does overmind fit in that scheme? And this would be a puzzle for everybody who studies Indian philosophy, because that is actually the contribution of Sri Aurobindo, who tapped into the Rigvedic actually vision and brought the overmind back to us. Yeah? Thank you for the enlightening presentation. So where does it fit, this self-knowledge of Atman Brahman identity of Vedanta? Does it belong to the supermind?
But what if it depends upon what do you mean by the self knowledge of the Atma? The self knowledge of the Atma in the Vedanta is that knowledge of the, what you call is the knowledge of the absolute unity. It is, which is the unmanifest. So it is beyond everything. So you can, with that knowledge, which where you are, you see which is a bit reflected in the comprehending a supermind, where oneness is identified with oneness. So that you cannot, unless you come down into the manifestation, towards the manifestation, then you cannot fit over mind. In that level, you cannot fit, because that oneness is identified with oneness. So there you don't have this. Only when you are considering the question of multiplicity. And you see, for Sri Aurobindo, it is important because he is not considering the multiplicity as something to be dispensed with. It's not illusory. It is not to be dispensed with. And so then you have to look it from a different perspective. If you are looking it from the perspective of the unmanifest, then you don't need to look into the supermind, overmind, all these things, because you are satisfied with the unmanifest in that poise. So that was always there. So Sri Aurobindo didn't have to take the trouble to follow a different pathway. He said that he opened up a spiritual mind range. This is the word he used. He said that one can, as a galloping station, from the mind, one can go to that spaceless, timeless, unmanifest absolute. That is one path which he regarded. He didn't disregard it. He regarded with what you call with the right with which it deserves. But at the same time, he said there is a spiritual mind range which can be unraveled, where the cognitive consciousness itself is undergoing an evolution. If you consider that, then that becomes what you call relevant. Otherwise, in that if you go straight to the unmanifest, all these things which you are discussing about supermind and overmind will not be important, because you see that as mother said that last time we discussed about this, that only Sri Aurobindo considers that the individual is not going to get obliterated in the absolute. The individual, once he has been produced, has to remain and has his own what you call own work. So the reality is not only transcendent, it is also universal and individual at the same time. So individual is not going to dissolve into the transcendent or not going to disappear into it. It is going to play its part jointly together. Once you see that that it has to join with the jivatma, the individual, the jivatma, it has to join with the jivatma. The psychic being has to join with the jivatma, and that joining takes place in the supermind. You see, the psychic being will join with the jivatma, and that joining will take place in the supermind. So it gives the individual a different identity. But if you are talking in terms of that super, what you call as the Vedantini is talking about, that going to the unmanifest, then all these things, they don't have that relevance.
Mm-hmm.
It's only because if you want to transform the world, then these things are necessary. If you are looking for a liberation from everything, then these things are not necessary.
Right. By the way, this topic is raised already in the Rig Veda, where there is Agastya Rishi trying to go to the beyond. He made his mind to go to the transcendental, and then he meets Indra, and Indra is the lord of Svar, of the intuition. And Indra tells him, where are you going? What are you looking for there? Their even intention to know the truth, to become immortal, is not kind of conscious, because it won't be relevant, because there you dissolve into the oneness, and then you don't have anymore the sense of immortality or sense of the fulfillment which you are looking for in this state of consciousness. So he says here, look at Agni, let us kindle the fire. That is the consciousness of immortality, and do the sacrifice, do the transformation of our nature and grow in consciousness here. Then you will realize that what you are looking for. This is a very important issue of how we view the tradition which we inherited from the past, especially older yoga traditions. But regarding Brahman and Atman, I could add one more thing, that Atman is, in a way, it's a kind of self-awareness of Brahman. If Brahman can be considered as existence, consciousness, bliss, then Atman is the existent, conscious, blissful. So there is some awareness, self-awareness, which becomes actually the foundation for all manifestation. That is from there that Supermind takes the idea that any poise of consciousness can be the self, and that's how it creates the multiplicity. It is that which is kind of coming from the transcendental, that idea of self-awareness. And it's an interesting link anyhow. There is another question to you. Is biological evolution necessary for consciousness evolution? Do they fulfill each other?
They,
Or
of
does
course,
it happen independently?
you see that they are complementing each other. Only that will be there will be a change of strategy. That so long, though it is the evolution of consciousness which was there, which is the basic thing, but still apparently it was the form that was evolving and the consciousness was following apparently. But once we have come to the level of the human mind, then further evolution will have a different grammar where the consciousness will, you can see that the consciousness is evolving and the biological evolution is following that. So it is the consciousness that is coming and taking the center stage once the mind principle has been established in evolution, and the biological evolution will of course follow it. So long it was apparently the opposite, that the consciousness was following the development of the form. So the human being was having a greater consciousness than the forms which preceded the human being in the evolution. But after the human being has manifested, because the mind has got a consciousness and mind has got a willpower, so now it has been decreed in that way that now the consciousness will start manifesting first or evolving first, and the mind and the body or the biological evolution will follow suit and will modify itself according to the necessities or the demands of the new consciousness that is evolving. That's what the mother talked about, the new body, gave the description of the new body, which will be more flexible, which will be more luminous, which will not have the oddities, the odd things that are there in our human body. So our system will undergo change, our organs also they will undergo change. The divine body, Sri Aurobindo said that how the functionings of the organs will change, how also we are moving to that, as Sri Aurobindo said that even that you can have reproduction without the usual means. Now together with our IVF and test tube babies and all these things, that you see that the world is also moving to that. Biologically it is also moving to what was envisaged that this could happen. So of course, but the evolution of consciousness now is the main thing that is going to drive the evolution of the body.
There are very good questions here. Unfortunately, we are a little bit over time, but shall I take them? Rather, a few of them. Yeah. This a very good question. What will happen to all world religions once Supermind becomes stronger? Will they all merge or go?
That it is the age of spirituality will come, where organized religions will lose the relevance and everybody has to discover what in our Indian saying was called the swadharma, one's own way of development and growth in consciousness. That will become gradually more and more important, and the organized religions which were there, which were controlling masses of men, that will gradually, that will go away. And the personally, everybody will have a personal religion in that sense. Everybody will have his own way of growing to the going to the divine. So it will be a very different thing. It will be actually working out of what we have always considered as a swadharma, which you could explain better than me, this term in Sanskrit. But that will actually come into reality at that time, and all these other things will go away. So it will be, spirituality will be coming into its place. And this is a very important thing. I frequently tell this to people in India because of different perceptions in India according to religious differences and all. People think that what will happen, one religion that is more militant might become more important, and all the older religions will go away. I tell them nothing to fear. As we progress, is because the mother has assured us that the age of religions is over, the age of spirituality will come. If you stick to that, if you adhere to that, if you believe that, then you know that things are going to change in a different way, not the old way. Perhaps this is the reason why the old fanaticism of different religion is now coming to the front, because they know that the time is going up, the time is up. So suddenly you see, you see that in 1960s, when the Beatles appeared, when the hippie movement came, there was a wave of internationalism all over the world. And it is very strange that by 1980s, by 1990s, secessionism started. You had ethnic riots in Serbia and Bosnia, and then afterwards it came out all over the world. Nobody could have predicted that ethnic riots could have happened at the end of the 20th century. But before that, there was this era of internationalism when everybody was singing Lennon's song and Elvis Presley. You see, that value of internationalism was there. And then that value of secessionism has now come. It has come because that internationalism has to come in a new alignment. You see, that time it came as a vital movement, but now it has to come as a spiritual movement. At that time, it came as a vital movement, which was necessary. The first breakthrough is always a vital breakthrough. But now it has to be resurrected. That internationalism has to be resurrected in higher terms.
Wonderful. You mentioned psychic being. How does it join to what? What is going on? What will go on with that?
The psychic being joins with the Jivatma. It doesn't dissolve, but it joins with the Jivatma. It's like that. You see that you have when people think that it's going to dissolve, then I tell them, and people don't understand that suppose your son has grown up and you are running a company, then your son joins with you to also be a director of that company. Your son is not disappearing inside. You are not dissolving like a sugar into the water. It's not like that. He's joining you for a greater partnership. So it happens. So it is like that. The psychic being will join. You see that it is carrying the intensity, and the Jivatma is carrying the wideness, extreme wideness, and that universality. And then one is carrying the impersonality, and one is representing the personality. When they both join together, then the work is more what you call dynamic. And this joining can only take place in the supermind. But it is very important that the uniqueness of the individual is refounded in new terms. So the uniqueness is always there. It is not going to go away. Only it is to be reformed or recast in a very new and very higher terms.
That was the reason of this creation. Bahusyam, may I be many. He wanted, the Supreme wanted to be many in reality, not just in the some kind of, illusion, imagining himself many. He wanted to be many. And that uniqueness is actually representative of that supreme individuality. There is another question interesting here. Why did the line of tapasya diverted from evolutionary path? Very provocative, very interesting question.
The line of
The line of tapasya.
Because is mainly it is psychological. It was very psychological that because they were, you see that the overmind, even if they reached the overmind also, they might have reached the overmind, but then they lost interest, because you see the overmind is the superconscient cosmic consciousness. The overmind is the top of the cosmic consciousness, is the superconscient cosmic consciousness, where you have the multiplicity, but the multiplicity that you see around you is always in time, in temporal. So it is not timeless. It is time, it is bound within the constraints of time and space. And once in tapasya they found the spaceless and the timeless absolute, that was great. It had a great psychological appeal. It was so interesting, so overwhelming, and so complete, so total. Then that became very important, and these other things become secondary. But that was also needed. Otherwise, the splendor of that absolute, the splendor of that unmanifest, we would not have known if they had not reached there and they had not described. That splendor of that absolute, we would not have known. So that was also necessary. You see, everything is necessary. In an adventure, you have to find out all things. It's just a place, just an adventure where all possibilities have to be worked out. So that was also a possibility that was worked out. You see, if you see Buddha, that he had gone out, and you see that the Shakti aspect is not there. But actually, is the Shakti aspect not there? That is very difficult to say. Otherwise, Buddha in a vision would not have come and told mother to come to take she showed by his hands the land of India, and then the mother the next day bought the final ticket when she was coming from Japan to India. That is Buddha who appeared and told her that I am talking to you in a way I had known you before. That we don't know, but it seems that is a recognition that the Buddha has for the Ishari, for the Shakti. But for some definitely some reason, something had to be what you call explored more. That was necessary also.
Thank you very much, Dr. Soumitra Basu. It was beautiful presentation and great discussion, great questions, great answers. I hope we continue with following up on this session and go deeper.
One day I have an intention to describe how, with the supermind, mother had the LSD experience, which is, oh, Michael and me, we spent so many hours in analyzing
Wow.
that experience. So.
Great. So, yes, Radhe, please.
Just two quick announcements before you leave. One, and I've been posting it in the chat box. All these webinars, including Dr. Basu's webinar today, is posted on our website, lagrassecenter.com. And our next new perspective right now is scheduled for March 20th. We're going to be bringing back Dr. Brant Courtwright by popular demand, and he will speak on the evolution of consciousness meets neuroscience. And he'll also address the important topic of brain health. So we hope you all can join us. And any feedback, comments, other webinar topics you'd like to listen to, please just email me. I've also posted my email address in the chat box. And thank you, Dr. Basu, as always, and we look forward to hosting you once again.
Yes.
Thank you.
Namaste.
Namaste.